starting at the age of 5, I've had many paranormal experiences. I wrote a book that just came out in May called My Paranormal Life. And I've also had, since the age of 13, 4 UFO sightings. March 1970, I'm 13 years old. My father picked me up one day from school. As we're driving, I look up through the windshield of my father's car. There's a huge UFO hovering above my father's car, maybe 200 feet above us. It was a silver V, shiny aluminum color, hovering above my father's car. So I see it, and I go, Dad, there's a UFO. Dad, there's a UFO. Stop the car. Dad, stop the car.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, for being here. I really appreciate it. So you've had a plethora of paranormal experiences and 4 UFO sightings?
Yes.
Right? And then the most recent one, I believe, was in June, correct?
June 2nd, that's right.
June 2nd. So how did it all begin?
Well, thank you for having me on. I've been a Hollywood publicist for over 40 years. My company is called Asbury PR Agency. We're in Beverly Hills. And I've worked with a lot of big movie stars, TV stars, rock stars, and all this. And that goes back, David, to when I was 15. I've been working with famous people since I was 15 years old. I grew up in Asbury Park, New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. When I was a teenager, I had very long hair. I was a drummer, and I was in rock bands. My best friend and I had a light show. And we were asked to be the lighting people and the stage managers for a little rock concert hall a block from the boardwalk in Asbury Park, New Jersey, called the Sunshine Inn. Well, if anyone knows Asbury Park, there's a pretty famous guy that came out from there called Bruce Springsteen. So my best friend Steve and I, we worked with Bruce Springsteen in the early 70s for a couple of his shows. We did lighting and stage crew, and before he was famous, and he was a local bar band. It was called the Bruce Springsteen Band. It wasn't even called the E Street Band yet. And a funny story is Clarence Clemens, Bruce's sax player, the big black guy sax player, legendary guy. In 1973, he asked me and my friend Steve. Now I had hair almost down to my ass, and my friend Steve had a Jew fro like out here, and we were 16. So Clarence, after one of the shows, Clarence came up to me and Steve, my friend. He goes, "Hey, do you guys want to come on the road with Bruce Springsteen and be our road crew?" And this is a true story. I look at Clarence comes. I go, Clarence, we're 16 years old. We don't even drive yet, and I'm pretty sure our fathers want us to go to college. So I turned down Bruce Springsteen. I would have been, schlepping amplifiers for the last 60 years.
Yeah, you'd have some crazy stories. I mean, you already have crazy stories, but
I have enough stories without schlepping amplifiers for 60 years. So that's where I'm from. So I grew up, I grew up like on the Asbury Park boardwalk. I went to Boston University, studied communications. Howard Stern was at my school when I was there. He was 2 years ahead of me. And I didn't meet him then. I met him 10 years later, actually in Hollywood, and we talked about Boston. After college, I worked briefly in Manhattan at Columbia Pictures on Fifth Avenue. I was 23 years old. I was working with Brooke Shields. But I was commuting from Jersey into Manhattan 4 hours a day on a bus. It was too hard for me. It was more than I could do. So I asked to be let go. And then by pure chance, I had some friends in L.A. who had just moved to L.A. from New Jersey. And they said, "Do you want to come visit?" And this is a classic story, man. I go to my father. I go, "Dad, I have some friends in L.A. They want me to go visit." He goes, "Schmuck, don't just visit, move there." And I look at my father for 5 seconds, David, and I go, "Okay." And I changed my entire life in 5 seconds. The entirety of my life changed in those 5 seconds when my father told me to move to LA. I said, "Okay." I didn't know where LA was on a map. This is true. I had to get a map of the United States and look at it. Then I bought my first beach. I remember that it was the summer of '80. I was preparing to move to LA. I bought my very first ever Beach Boys album, and I'm like, "Oh, these songs are pretty good." And I'm studying the Hollywood Bowl and this Hollywood Walk of Fame and the Hollywood sign, and I'm like, "Oh, I guess there's a lot out there." I knew nothing, man. I was a child of New Jersey, New York City, and Boston. I knew. What did I know about Los Angeles? I knew nothing. I knew nothing. Anyway, so I've been here 44 years. I've worked for the American Film Institute. I worked for the Playboy Channel. I was the first publicist there. And of course, I had just gotten married, and I'm a straight guy, and I'm working with literally with naked Playboy buddies, literally. And my wife is calling me, "We need milk, we need bread," and they're in my office, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is crazy." I worked out here at Columbia Pictures in Burbank. I worked at two very, very big PR firms for 10 years total. During that time, I represented Jay Leno when he first got The Tonight Show. And then when I turned 40, 28 years ago, I started my own company, Asbury PR. And so my own business is 28 years. The other day, I turned 28, my company. So that's who I am professionally and career wise. And that's like a major track of my life. Now, to answer your question, the other major track of my life, I've gone back in my head, starting at the age of 5, I've had many paranormal experiences. I wrote a book that just came out in May called My Paranormal Life. And it's a memoir. And it's a lot of paranormal experiences. And I've also had, since the age of 13, 4 UFO sightings. So all of that's in my new book, My Paranormal Life. Do you want to do the paranormal stuff or the UFO stuff? Because in my mind, they're a little bit apples and oranges.
Let's start with the UFO experiences, and then
Okay,
we'll go into the
sure.
paranormal.
Okay, so this is a story that put me on the map, I guess, because I'm kind of well known now in the world of ufology the last 2 years. March 1970, I'm 13 years old. My father picked me up one day from school in the afternoon in his car. So we're driving home. He's driving, obviously. I'm 13. I'm in the front seat. Daylight, probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Suburban New Jersey, where I grew up. And we're driving home. As we're driving, I look up through the windshield of my father's car. There's a huge UFO hovering above my father's car, maybe 200 feet above us. It was a silver V, like the letter V, like Victor. It was a huge V, like Victor, shiny aluminum color, hovering above my father's car. So I see it and I go, "Dad, there's a UFO. Dad, there's a UFO. Stop the car. Dad, stop the car. Stop the car." I'm screaming at my father, "Stop the car." He stops the car and we get out. We're standing in front of my father's car and it's hovering, David, just literally like it's there. It's like putting on a show for me and my father. It's like a private show because no one else was. It was daylight, but no one else was out, right? And so I'm jumping up and down with my finger. I go, "Dad, look, it's Star Trek. Dad, it's Star Trek. It's the UFO. Dad, look, isn't this cool? Dad, we're seeing a UFO." I was so thrilled, man. I remember clearly. Dad, look. My father looked at it, bored to tears. Bored. He had no expression. He couldn't care less. He looked like he had seen this thing 500,000 times. He had, and this is the whole crux of the whole story that we'll get to in a minute. No interest, no interest. He wasn't happy. He wasn't scared. He wasn't afraid. He didn't say, "Oh my God, let's get out of here. It's going to kill." Nothing, man. David, he had no reaction to it. Me, you and I would be jumping and high fiving. We'd be crying. We'd be taking photos. Of course, there were no cell phones in 1970, but it was profound. Okay. So my father was bored. He's looking at his car, he's looking at his watch, looking at his shoes. Couldn't care less, and that always disturbed me. After a couple of minutes, and it's just hovering there. No propellers, no smoke, no sound, just hang like the pyramid of Egypt is hanging above our heads. And my father, after a couple of minutes, he goes, "Come on, kid, let's go home." Fine. So I get in the car. We drive home. I remember as we drove home, it followed us, the car, for maybe a block, and then it took off and went away. We go home. I run into the kitchen. This is 1970. We had a rotary phone. You're probably too young to remember your rotary phones.
I
You
remember
put
them.
you put your finger and you dial. I run into the kitchen and I call the Asbury Park Press newspaper, and I say, "Hello, my name is Danny. I just I'm doing my 13 voice. I just saw a UFO with my father. Just saw a UFO." And the lady said to me, "Sonny, I can't talk to you right now. I'm getting hundreds of phone calls about this. I got to go. I'm really sorry." That's what she said to me. I remember clearly. She hung up on me. I looked in the paper every day that week. No article ever ran about the UFO sighting. Now, many remarkable things happened afterwards, but the first one, David, is that I forgot that happened for 47 years. I just forgot about it for 47 years. Why? My dad and I never discussed it ever to his dying day. We never ever once discussed it ever again, ever. I don't recall telling my mother or my two brothers, right? But the bigger picture is when I'm 13, I just gotten my drum set for my bar mitzvah. I'm in rock bands. I'm going to rock concerts. I'm staring at beautiful girls from afar who I'm too shy to talk to. My life is pretty girls and rock concerts and my drums. I'm not thinking about aliens. There's no aliens. It was a half hour experience. I forgot about it for 47 years, just entirely. Okay. Now here comes the good part of the story. What happened 47 years later? Well, my father died. My father died in April 2017 in Florida. He retired to Florida. He died with his second wife. He had a bad death. 3 days after he died, I'm here in LA. I'm very sad. So I go to Junior's Deli in Westwood. They're not there anymore. I went out of business. But I went to Junior's Deli to get a pastrami sandwich because my father loved those sandwiches. So I went to get a sandwich and think about my father and just be sad. That was my goal for that day. Go there and be sad and think about my father. I go to Junior's Deli, and all of this is true. And it's every time I tell the story, I still can't believe it myself. But I sat down, I ordered a sandwich. I'm sitting in a deli thinking about my father. A beam of light or a beam of energy from above, from the right side, slammed into the right side of my head. Just bang, like this hard, like as though someone's knuckles had hit me in the head like this. Bang. And then projected through my eyes and my brain, projected in the air in front of my face. I'm going to say 8 inches in front of my face was a home movie, a 3D color hologram home movie of the 1970 UFO setting I had with my father. It played. It played in the air. Now I'm like, so David, I'm waiting for my pastrami. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I'm watching it now. People said, my mother goes, oh, it's a memory. It's a memory. It wasn't a memory. I'm in the movie. The frame. My joke is God, the cameraman, God's camera was behind my father's car. So in this movie is my father's car, me, my father, and the V in the sky, and I see myself jumping up and down, pointing. So I'm watching this. I'm 47 years later. I'm like, holy God, this is amazing. I remember this. I remember this, and I'm watching it and it had audio because I'm saying, Dad, look, it's a UFO. Dad, look. This time, my dad was just as bored, no interest, same. But then he looks at me, David. He looks down, he winks at me, and then he goes, come on, kid, let's go home. Okay, so the whole thing is like what, 20, 30 seconds at the most it played. Then it just like dissipated. It just went away. Now I'm shaking. I'm sitting there shaking, going, what the hell was that? Oh my God, I can't believe this. Then part two is I hear it. Now I'm clairaudient. I've gotten maybe 10 messages in my life, and they're always in my right ear. It's a disembodied male voice. Although once I got a voice from the chandelier, and we'll talk about that later because the chandelier voice changed my life. But I get a voice. It said, get a pen, get a pen. You need a pen, get a pen, get a pen. I asked my waiter for a pen. He gave it to me. I put it in my right hand. My hand did automatic writing, if you've ever heard of that. I've heard of it. I never knew I never did it until this moment at the deli. On the table in front of me was a paper placemat. So I get the pen, put it in my hand. My right hand started writing. It wasn't me, man. It was my right hand. I'm like watching my hand. My hand wrote, write a book about benevolent aliens. Then my hand wrote, lead character's father knew about UFOs. Then my hand wrote capital A, capital T, capital C. And then my hand stopped moving. So I'm shaking. I'm holding this paper. I'm like, what the hell is this? It says, write a book. I go, well, I guess I have to write a book about benevolent aliens. Then it says, lead character's father knew about UFOs. Now, in that moment, David, I realized my father knew about UFOs. I knew instinctively. My father, because I would be the lead character. And my father knew about UFOs, and I'll tell you in a minute why that's true. And then ATC, I'm looking, and I came up with After They Came, which is the name of my UFO book, After They Came. Then I finally get my pastrami sandwich, right? I finally get my sandwich. I inhaled that thing, man. I drove home as fast as I could. And for the next 8 months, day and night, I wrote my book After They Came. It was given to me. It was a gift. That book was a gift from above. It was given to me literally. It was like, my joke is like when God spoke to Moses, Moses, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. It was, my mind was like, Dan, write a book about aliens. It was given unto me. The book was given unto me. Now, who was my father? Now, again, this is 3 days after my father died. I had this vision, let's call it. Now, who's my father? My father worked for the Army for 45 years, top secret. He was an electronics engineer and a physicist. He was a genius, my father. And he worked for the U.S. Army at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, Army base. And he invented, after he died, we found out my father invented military drones for the government, for the Army. He invented military drones, my father. He used to go to White Sands Missile Testing Range, I think in Nevada or New Mexico, for decades and watch drones and missiles and radar systems that he designed and developed. He would watch them be tested. After he died, I called my mother, who was my father's first wife, and I said, Mom, all the years you were with Dad, did he ever talk about UFOs? She said, David, she told me a story I had never heard before he died. She said, in the early 50s, they took your father deep into the vaults at Fort Monmouth Army Base. They showed him something top secret. He came home pale and shaking and nervous. She said, and then when he came home, my mother said, honey, what's wrong? My father said, I saw something top secret today in the vault. I can never tell you as long as I live. And my mother said he walked down the hall, and she said he was never the same. He's never the same. Now, let's think about this. What could my father have seen that made him so profoundly upset and was never the same? Well, it had to be an extraterrestrial craft or extraterrestrial technology of some kind, or an alien living or an alien dead. What else could it be? My father was a pretty hardy guy. What could have shaken him? So I believe today that they showed him a UFO, a craft, a recovered craft. Now, where my father worked, Fort Monmouth, they invented thousands, the scientists there invented thousands of electronics and new technologies. They have patents for thousands of things that were invented at Fort Monmouth. Long story short, I researched my father. I researched his workplace. Today, I am convinced 100% where my father worked, Fort Monmouth, they reverse engineered recovered UFO craft. Do you know who Stephen Greer is? Dr. Stephen Greer?
I do.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Stephen Greer is, along with Steve Bassett, who happens to be my best friend, they are the leading disclosure advocates in Washington, D.C. Last year, Stephen Greer did a 3-hour talk at the Washington Press Club about the dozens of whistleblowers he has at the ready to come forward to testify before Congress about reverse engineering and UFOs that they know of, where they are, what they worked on, and aliens living and dead. He has like 100 people lined up. And until Congress passes the Schumer Rounds Act, that should happen soon, hopefully. If and when that happens, a lot of people are going to testify before Congress, and that's when disclosure is going to happen. People will go, okay, clearly they're here. Anyway, what was my point? Okay, so Stephen Greer did this presentation. It's on my TV. I watched it. And in this talk, David, he shows a slide of 145 U.S. military bases that Stephen Greer, has proof of through the whistleblowers that worked on reverse engineering of UFO technology. So I freeze framed it, right? I have a big TV. I freeze framed it. I get up. I look with my finger. Number 51, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Well, I started to cry. I'm like, oh my God, here's proof that my father worked for 45 years at Fort Monmouth, and he knew that there were extraterrestrial craft there. My father was involved with that. I know he was. That's why when we saw the UFO, right, no reaction. My father, David, it would be like you and I looking like my joke is like looking at a head of lettuce in the supermarket. It's like, okay, he'd seen it already. He knew what it was. So I wrote the book. Now it got published in 2023. It took me 5 years to get a publisher. It gets published. I go to a bunch of alien conferences and I befriend Paul Hynek, Steve Bassett, Nick Pope, Richard Dolan, George Norrie, Whitley Strieber, Travis Walton, Ron James. I think I said Paul Hynek. I mean, the top people. I'm because they all loved my book. They loved this dopey book after they came. I'm like, really? You liked it? They go, Dan, it's a movie. People said, George Norrie goes to my face, Danny, you know it's a movie, right? I go, yeah, George, and and hopefully my hair will grow back on my head too. Okay, yeah, it's a movie, yeah. So anyway, it put me on the map. It put me on the map. The month it came out, like suddenly I'm Steve Bassett's like literally my best friend. So Stephen and I then created something called the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We created this last early summer. I'm the chairman. He's the executive director. I pulled it out of the sky. We had lunch. He said, Dan, I'm a disclosure guy. You're a Hollywood guy. What can we do together? David, I went like this. I looked at this guy for 5 seconds. I came back. I go, Steven, we're going to create the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. I didn't know what it was. He didn't. We didn't know what it was. He just said, that's it. That's exactly it. We shook hands. And then all last summer, we developed the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We came up with what it was. Basically, it's a networking group. We have about 200 members today. Half of our members are UFO or ET experiencers or researchers or disclosure advocates. What is disclosure? Disclosure is a president or a prime minister or the Pope or some world leader goes on TV and says, okay, you know what, you guys, extraterrestrials have been here for thousands of years. We've known about it since the 30s. We've been working with them. We didn't want to tell you. We didn't want to scare you, but the time has come. Extraterrestrials are real. That's disclosure. That's going to happen. I hope it happens in my lifetime. And okay, so half of our members are on the ET UFO side. The other half, what's interesting about Hollywood Disclosure Alliance is half of our members are Hollywood writers, producers, directors, or performers. We have movie stars, Dee Wallace, Thomas Jane, Dania Ramirez, Dave Foley, Shirley MacLaine. We're trying to get Elijah Wood and Danny Aykroyd. We're hoping to get them. So it's a unique group. And why did I put it together? So people with these incredible experiences can network with Hollywood producers and screenwriters to develop story content based, movies for future movies and TV shows based on real life paranormal experiences of real life people. That's my goal. There are already a few TV shows and movies that are being germinated, let's say through it's called HDA, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, HDA. And November 1st will be 1 year old. In a few weeks, will officially be 1 year old. And in a year, with 200 members, including movie stars, I mean, I think it's pretty remarkable. And all that happened, David, because I went to get a pastrami sandwich.
Do you think that the UFO that you saw with your dad was one of ours, or do you think it was alien tech?
Okay, that's a really great question. For the last 2 years, I was pretty convinced it was a man-made military drone from Fort Monmouth, from my father's workplace, which was not far away, using extraterrestrial technology. That's what I was thinking, right? Then the more I discussed this with Steve Bassett. Now, Steve Bassett's a major disclosure guy out of Washington. And when I told him this story, he goes, Dan, he goes, that sounds like the movie that you saw at the deli. He said that was an extraterrestrial download. He goes, a lot of people get ET messages in their brains. He goes, yours was projected. He goes, but most people get them in their brains, and it's an ET download. So perhaps, David, because it goes back to the UFO from 1970. Now, were there aliens in that the V, and they gave me the download at the deli, or I like to think it was my late father from heaven. Here, my story is it was my father from heaven. He was only dead for 3 days at the time, right? 3 days. And then he visited me in my room, and we can talk about that. After he died, he visited me 3 times in my bedroom. I think my father said, Danny, my whole life, I couldn't tell you or anyone what I did for a living, but I'm dead now. I'm on the other side. I don't have to keep my, oath to the military. Remember that UFO we saw, Danny, in 1970? I had a hand in that. That's how I interpret that. But to answer your question, now the more that I think about it, David, it could well have been extraterrestrials that were in there in that V. I'll never know. But when I got that download at the deli, it was one of the most profound paranormal moments of my life. I don't know if my dad, did my dad's ghost from heaven have the ability to send me a download, or was that extraterrestrial? I really don't know.
Yeah, and that's my other question. What do you believe the connection is with UFOs and spirit? Is it one and the same? Is the phenomenon the same? You've got Chris Bledsoe saying that these are benevolent beings, that they're angels, and then this connection that you have is very spiritual. Having this holographic image, in front of you from your dad, because it's a very heartfelt moment that you had. That says something.
Right.
So it feels to me like a spiritual experience. And then, but it has to do with UFOs. So what is that connection? What do you think?
That's a really good question. A lot of people have asked me that recently. A couple of things. I read Chris Bledsoe's book recently. Angels, by definition, would be extraterrestrial, by definition, right? God, and always have arguments with my ex-wife and my daughter because they're on the religious side. I go, God, by definition, is an extraterrestrial. No, no, God's not extraterrestrial because he's here on earth and he's in heaven and he's everywhere. I go, well, he's not really walking around, so I think he's by definition. No, 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 God's not extraterrestrial. But think about it, right? Angels would be extraterrestrial by definition because they're not human. Uh, 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 there are different theories about where extraterrestrials are from. There's I think four different theories, and I love all four. One is obviously they're from very very far away planets, galaxies, star systems, and they figured out how to either time travel or travel through wormholes. However, there's a fold in space. I forget, a string theory proves that space and time are folded and you can cut right through. So some of them logically, some extraterrestrials have to be from very, very far away physical places. Second theory is that they are interdimensional entities. Well, I only heard about that about 2 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, that explains so much. Because so many people, listen, I have friends who have been abducted. I have quite a few friends that have been abducted. Some, most bad, one very, very good. But extraterrestrials, if they can travel through walls and ceilings and doors, right? They can move through physical objects on our Earth, then they're interdimensional by definition. If they have that ability, and countless people, I'm friends with Travis Walton, Deborah Jordan Cobble was abducted. I know Kathleen Martin, I'm a friend of hers. Betty and Barney Hill were her aunt and uncle. They've all agreed, yeah. Interdimensional is one of them. So one of the aspects of aliens are interdimensional. Okay. Another one is that have long been, and this is great too. They've long been on planet Earth. They're inside the Earth, or they're underneath the deepest oceans. Well, there's a lot of research and a lot of evidence that they've been on the Earth for hundreds of thousands of years, and they just hide. If they're in the depths 3 miles down in the oceans, we don't know they're there. We can't find them. And then my favorite one, David, is that they're us from the future. Well, I love that one, man. They're us from the future. Because if that's the case, that's just because, look, they have heads, nose, eyes, ears, sort of 2 arms, 2 legs, most of them. And it seems to me if we live another million years, we might look like a tall gray or something. We might evolve or devolve to look like them. So those are the common theories where they're from. Now, ghosts. My father was a ghost. My grandfather was a poltergeist, and we can do those stories too. Those, by definition, are, I guess, by definition, would be interdimensional. My father came to in my room 3 times after he died. Once to give me a very important message, and another time 20 years ago, my grandfather was a poltergeist and was throwing things and breaking things and slamming doors. And then we figured out it was my grandfather. So to answer you, I think there's a lot of stuff going on interdimensionally that would be awesome. I think there's 11 dimensions. I've heard 11 or 12 dimensions. There could be another us, you and I, right now, and another dimension. You're purple and I'm yellow, and we're upside down, and we have things, and we're talking, and trees are growing out of our head. I don't know, but yes, interdimensional beings. I'm quite sure. Dr. Avi Loeb is a friend of mine from Harvard. He believes that many of these entities are interdimensional. He's a Harvard genius. I'm a moron. In fact, when I interviewed him, I go, Dr. Loeb, I'm really nervous because you're a genius and I'm a moron. And he laughed and he goes, Dan, don't worry about it. Don't worry.
What do you think that our military is doing with this tech? I mean, if they've had it since the 50s or 40s or longer, possibly,
Yes.
um, what do you think they're doing with it?
Well, there are rumors with evidence that we have a base. There's a huge base on the dark side of the moon, and that we have bases on Mars. And I've heard that and read that in the many, many different places. We have not been told the truth about the aliens at all, their technology, and what we've been doing. We recovered the craft from Roswell. That's a true statement of fact in 1947. They covered that up. Oh, it's a weather balloon. The next day, oh, it's a weather balloon. Sorry, we blew it. The guy wrote a press release, flying disc recovered at Roswell. The press release ran all over the world, front page, all over the world. My joke is President Truman's head exploded when he heard that. Imagine you're President Truman, right? In June 1947. You hear what? Some schmucky publicist at Roswell sent out a press release about aliens and they didn't ask me? I'm the president. His head had to have exploded. This is my joke that he called Roswell or his people. Who the hell are you guys to announce to the world that there's aliens without getting presidential approval? Are you guys crazy? You have to rescind this. And it was actually, I think, within 18 hours, they did a press conference. Oh, whoa, 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 wasn't a flying disc. It was a weather balloon. So we messed it. These are the top guys in the world. They didn't know a UFO disc from a weather balloon. Well, of course they did. And these guys went to their deathbeds. The major players at Roswell on their deathbeds: Jesse Marcel, William Walter Haut, and Blanchard, Colonel Blanchard. These guys on their deathbeds said we recovered an extraterrestrial craft and aliens, and they swore to their families on their deathbeds that had really happened, and they covered that all up. Um, what do we do with the tech? Boy, it's such a well. Obviously, we spy on our enemies. I mean, my dad's cover story. Anytime anyone asks my father, "What do you do, Dad? What do you do for a living?" I help America win the Cold War. What does that mean, Dad? I help to spy on our enemies. That's the only thing he ever said. I spy on our enemies. So my father's drones that he was building spied on Russia, China, North Korea, and at the time, I know North Vietnam. He once told me that he was spying over North Vietnam. So they're used to surveil our enemies. That's the easy answer. But there's so much that we were never told about what there's a guy named oh boy, I always forget his name. Skunkworks, the guy from Skunkworks, not John Lear, the other guy, Ben Rich, a guy named Ben Rich was the head of Skunkworks, one of the major aerospace companies. In the 70s, he said, we've long had the technology to take ET home. Now, it must have been the 80s because ET came out in 82. In the 80s, Ben Rich said, we've long had the technology to take ET home. He's the guy that his company would have worked with the recovered tech. So to answer you, it has not yet been revealed, but I've heard bases on the moon, bases on Mars, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
So curious what they're doing with this technology. I mean, if they've had it this long, have they actually been able to reverse engineer it? And do you feel like they have contact with these beings? Like, are they working with these beings?
Okay, so one of my best friends is a guy named Earl Grey Anderson. You might want to interview him. He's the head of MUFON. Do you know what MUFON is, right?
I
MUFON?
do.
Okay. He's the head of MUFON, Southern California, one of my best friends. His mother, David, this is such a great story. Earl's mother worked for Howard Hughes, the man, at Howard Hughes Aircraft. She worked for Howard Hughes, the man. He used to send her to Nevada to huge underground cities, huge military facilities, many, many stories under the ground. I believe in Nevada or New Mexico. And she said they were whole cities there, and the extraterrestrials were working with scientists in these underground bases to help them, to translate their futuristic technology so human beings could understand it. She worked for Howard Hughes in the 40s and the 50s. And she told Earl when he was a little kid, and she actually said, "Don't ever tell anyone." And then he told his schoolmates at school when he was like 6, and he got in trouble. He got in trouble. He almost got his mother thrown in jail for treason. But they've been, yeah, the extraterrestrials, some of them have been cooperating with our scientists. Now, last night, my daughter called me because she goes, "Dad, do you think Pop Pop may have worked actually with extraterrestrials, and that's why you've been sort of a contactee?" I'm like, you know what? That would make some sense to me. No way to prove it. He's long dead, but that would make sense. So to answer you, from all I know, yes, yes, there are ETs alive in all over the world, but in the U.S. who cooperate with the military.
What are your thoughts on 2027?
Is that when they're going to disclose? Is that disclosure?
You
I've
know,
heard.
it's
I've
the
I've also heard 2025. By the way.
Yeah, 2026, 2027. John Ramirez has said some things. Chris Bledsoe has mentioned 2026, seeing the lady, that there's going to be a new knowledge. And then the CIA, even Lou Elizondo has hinted that time is not a luxury we can afford. So it seems like something is coming up. And I was just wondering if you had any insight as to what that is.
Well, the disclosure movement has been gaining remarkable traction since 2017. New York Times front page article, 2017 December. Pentagon is still studying UFOs by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. Okay, then the three Navy videos were released. I believe Lou Elizondo had a hand in those, in the New York Times article and in those videos. Last year, David Grush testified before Congress, major Air Force intelligence officer, that we have long had extraterrestrial technology, craft, and biologics. He called them. He never said the word aliens. He said we've had off-world biologics, living and dead. And this is a major guy. And he testified for 3 hours before Congress, live under oath. Do you think he's lying? Is he going to lie and go get arrested for treason? I don't think he's going to lie under oath for Congress. I don't think that's going to happen. The disclosure movement has been happening more and more. Lou Elizondo's book came out last month, bestseller. There's another guy now, I forget his name. Another guy like Lou, he's now writing his memoir. It's going to come out next year. More and more major people now are coming forward. Um, it seems to me that the extraterrestrials themselves would dictate when they're going to land on the White House lawn or in Times Square, right? Or Dodgers. In my book, I actually have them in Dodger Stadium in my book, which I think Dodger Stadium would be a good choice because then all of Hollywood, we could cover it for Hollywood. Um, it's the movement, official disclosure movement is gaining traction. Chuck Schumer is working with two members of my group, Steve Bassett and Daniel Sheehan in Washington. Daniel Sheehan is the top civil rights attorney in the United States. He's on my board of directors. He and Steve Bassett are best friends. They have been meeting with Chuck Schumer for about 2 years, trying to get the Disclosure Act, it's called the Schumer Rounds Act, trying to get it approved by Congress. The day that happens, David, 100 people are going to come forward and testify to incredible stuff, highly detailed information. That act will protect them so they don't get arrested for treason and they won't lose their pensions. I believe in my heart the biggest reason my father never told me or anyone, my dad couldn't wait to retire and get his pension. He couldn't wait, man. Like from his 40s and 50s. In 15 more years, I can retire. I get my pension. Okay, I'm going to get my pension. He couldn't wait for that pension to go to Florida and hang out with his wife and go swimming. My dad couldn't wait. He wasn't going to tell my mother or me there's aliens and go to jail for treason and to lose his pension. There's no chance that that was going to happen. But brave young people like David Grush are coming forward. Lou Elizondo is coming forward. More and more people are coming forward now. The 2025, 26, 27. I think the window. I think it's in the window. Disclosure will either come through these people testifying before Congress, and then the next president will go, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to tell you the truth. We've known about extraterrestrial life for a very long time. That's disclosure. That's like D-Day number 2. Then from there, it's going to be a whole new paradigm because extraterrestrials have technology. They have free energy. This is a big thing too, David, by the way, why we haven't been told. They travel without coal, oil, gas, lithium, or nuclear energy. However extraterrestrials travel, if they were to give mankind this energy, and there are theories that they already have a long time ago, there goes oil. It's the end of the oil industry. The oil billionaires in Texas and Russia and around the world, their heads will explode. What? We don't need oil anymore? What? It changes the global. Richard Dolan says it changes the global economy overnight if we had free energy. That's another reason they've not allowed this to come out. Anyway, I'm just babbling now, and I forgot your question.
I asked you your thoughts on 2027. And so, you talked about disclosure, and you think
it
that it's going to
yeah.
be the next president will probably be the disclosure president, whoever
If
it
you,
is.
I saw Steve Bassett recently on Labor Day. We spent the day together on Labor Day, and he said, Dan, in February 2025, whoever the next president is gonna disclose. I said, okay, Stephen, it should only happen. He's been saying that for 30 years, but we are getting very, very close. The home run would be that they go to Dodger Stadium or Yankee Stadium or the White House, and it's live TV all over the world, and they beam down. We come in peace. We're not here to kill you or eat you or harm you. We've been here a long time. That's the home run. Now, let me say this. I'm friends with Nick Pope. Nick Pope gave a talk early this year at Conscious Life Expo in LA. He said, according to his sources, many of the aliens who are going to disclose are demonic and evil. So Nick Pope said, be careful what you wish for, disclosure people, because many of these races are evil and demonic. He goes, I know this for a fact. Then you talk to my friend Steve Bassett. Oh, it's going to be unicorns and rainbows. They're going to reveal themselves. We're going to be dancing horrors in the street and making love on the sidewalk, and everything's going to be great because the aliens. And then Nick Pope, no. They're going to be evil and demonic. Be careful what you wish for. So somewhere in between unicorns, rainbows, and they're going to come and kill us and eat us, because there are many different races of extraterrestrials. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that. There are many different races, just like there are different races of humans. There are, I think it's 130 races of extraterrestrials. Some are the little grays, some are the tall grays, some are the reptilians, some are the praying mantis ones, which blows my mind. My favorites are the Pleiadians, the tall 7-foot Nordic tall whites with the long white hair and the blue eyes. I have a good friend named Mark. He lives in the Bay Area. He's 60 now. He's been abducted every few years since the age of 5 by the Pleiadians. And they are kind and gentle and beautiful people, and they teach him things. Last I met him 2 years ago. When I met him, he said, Dan, 10 years ago, on one of my abductions on the ship, they told him he needed to bring solar power to the Native American Indians in the American Southwest. They then, David, implanted in his head a new solar energy technology system. They implanted it in his head. He goes back to Earth. He meets with engineers and scientists. They create this solar energy that the aliens gave him. He brought it to the Native American Indians over the last 10 years. He's brought power to tens of thousands of Native American Indians, and he's become a millionaire in the process, my friend Mark.
I mean, that sounds to me. What are Pleiadians? I mean, Pleiadians. I guess they come from the Pleiades star
Yeah,
system, but
yeah, right.
I also like. But they also sound angelic. Like that sounds like a benevolent, like angelic race of beings. If they can, like manipulate time and space and do all of these things, like what's the difference between them and angels? And did they tell him specifically we are Pleiadians, or is he giving them that label based on what our culture has described as Pleiadian?
That's a really good question. I believe that they told him where they were from. He said he calls them. He says that he told me just factually they're Pleiadian. He said they are. He calls them the light beings. He said when he's with them, he cries because they're so physically beautiful. He said, especially the women. When you look at them, he goes, you cry because they're so magnificent and they glow. He said they actually glow. There's like a radiance that comes from them. I will say 90% sure he that they told him we're from the Pleiades. In my book, after they came, the premise is two aliens from the Pleiades, a male and a female, come to Earth to save mankind, solve all of mankind's problems, working through this schmucky guy who, on page one, my lead character, who's based on me, my lead character, he's a 70-year-old guy, total loser in life, hates everything, he's miserable. It's his 70th birthday. He swims out to sea off of Malibu. He swims out to sea and drowns himself. That's because he just wants to be dead. That's his goal in life, is to be dead. Okay. As he's drowning, this huge UFO comes out of the Pacific, beams him up, saves his life, travels across LA, beams him down to Dodger Stadium along with the two aliens. And then they say, people of the earth, don't be afraid. We are here. We love you. We saved this guy's life. We are here to solve all of your problems, but we will only work through this guy. We have a relationship with this guy. And then they leave. The aliens leave. And then the rest of the book, you find out how the aliens had a relationship with this guy. Well, it turns out this guy's father, who was basically my father, had a relationship with one of the aliens from 70 years earlier, and the lead character never knew that until after this event happened. So it's very much mirrors and parallels my real life.
I want to believe that the benevolent beings are going to come and they're going to save us and help us evolve into the next stage of our evolution.
I did a bunch of UFO gatherings to promote the book. And when I discussed that the book is about benevolent aliens, right? And then after my talks, people come up to me, Dan, you wrote a book about benevolent aliens, not aliens that are here to kill us and eat us. I want a copy. So, really? Okay. So I'm telling you, like, honestly, a lot of people said that to my face. Thank God, finally, there's like a book that they're benevolent and not going to kill us and eat us. So my book is a tweak. It's different. Uh, I've been interviewed all over the world the last few years. Most people, we talk about how are aliens portrayed in the media since like let's say the 40s, the 50s. Most of those movies, The Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the Worlds, Independence Day, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, aliens are coming to kill us and eat us, right? Most of the big giant UFO alien movies, Alien, of course, they're coming to kill us and eat us. There's a handful, two of them by Spielberg, of benevolent aliens. Close Encounters and E.T., those are benevolent aliens. The movie The Arrival, The Abyss, and there's another one I always forget. There's five that we've identified where the aliens are benevolent. The other 10,000 movies, they're coming to kill us, destroy Earth, and eat us. So that's why I wrote my book. It was like, why can't they be benevolent? Because my friend Mark, when I wrote the book, I did an event in San Francisco, UFO Con. Mark Glenmore was next to me at his booth. I gave him my book. He read the book over the course of the next couple of weeks. He called me. He goes, Dan, he goes, this is the most amazing book I've ever read in my life. I said, why? He goes, I've lived this. He goes, these Pleiadians that you described are exactly the Pleiadians I've known since the age of 5. He goes, I don't know how you did it, but your book to me was nonfiction. It was my life. And he was crying on the phone when he told me. And I'm like, wow, Mark, I guess you and I were meant to be friends and meet each other. He told me it was dead on.
Well, you were given these downloads. I mean, you had this placed in your brain with a light beam while you were sitting at a deli. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it kind of it was probably like this packet of information that came in, this download,
I
and
know.
you're not even aware of it until you started writing it.
That's you're not gonna believe this, but last night, literally last night, my daughter said the exact same thing to me. She goes, "Dad, you didn't just get the download to write a book; you got the whole book." And my daughter told me last night. I'm like, you know what? Because I wrote it every day and night for 8 months, straight through. I never missed a day. And when it was done, I'm like, where did this come? How did I think of this? So yeah, I think David, I think you're right. I got the idea to write it, but I also got somehow. I mean, when I got that thing in my head, it hurt. It was
Did
like
it really?
someone. It was like I mean, it was like someone had taken their knuckles and knocked me. And I'm telling you, God's honest truth. They knocked me. It knocked me on the right side of the head, and then projected instantly. Well, that was a real thing. That was a moment in my life. That was a paranormal download thing, like a digital. It was like I was a computer, and someone put in like a flash drive into my head, and then like, bah, there it is. It happened instantly from the knock in the head to the movie. That happened all within 2 seconds.
Like how do you process that? How does that happen to you? And it's just so out of the ordinary. Like are you just left in shock? Were you left smiling? Like what was going on inside when that happened?
My heart was racing and I was shaking during that. And when I wrote with the pen, I was shaking. I knew something extraordinary in my life was happening. I said to myself, "Thanks, Dad," because I felt like the thing from above. I felt like it was my dad, like my dad. And this is the first time I've ever said this. It felt like perhaps my dad in heaven sent me like, here, Danny, like a bow and arrow, like bang into my head. It was like my dad was up there. I don't know that it was, but it was kind of instinctively I felt that it was from my dad. But I went with the flow, man. Let me tell you a quick story. Years ago, when I turned 40, I was working for a boss who I hated for 7 years. I hated this guy's guts, hated his guts. I just turned 40. I'm still working for this guy after 7 years. I had brought him hundreds of thousands of dollars in business over the years. We're at a meeting at the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills, and we're meeting with some new clients. And he's going on, telling these clients about what a genius he is and how successful and how great he is. And I'm sitting there thinking, I want to kill myself. I'm suicidal. As I'm sitting there, David, and I swear to my daughter, this is true, the chandelier at the Four Seasons Hotel, chandelier above my head to the left, the chandelier said, Dan, and out loud, like in my ears, Dan. I look up to the chandelier, start your own business. I swear on my daughter, okay? I said, what? Start your own business. I go like this. I start smiling. I stand up. My boss is sitting there. He goes, "What, Dan? What's happening?" I go, "I have to leave now." I got up in the middle of the meeting. It's the greatest moment of my professional life. I got up in the middle of a pitch meeting, went home, called every client I knew, and said, "If I start my own business, will you follow me?" Every single one said, "Where you go, I go." I went from 80,000 a year to 600,000 a year because the chandelier told me to start my own business. 3 months later is when the business opened. It changed my life. In every possible way, it changed my life. Now, my dad was alive. Okay, so it wasn't my dad. Was that God? Was it aliens? Was it my spirit guides? Was it an angel? That one. That I would say that David and the movie in the deli were well. I didn't tell you about when I fell off a sign and died and came back to life, but I've had remarkable paranormal experiences. But those two are my favorites.
You said it came from the chandelier. Like, how do you know it came from the chandelier? Was it talking? Did it have a mouth? Like, or did you just hear a voice?
It came as God is my witness. I'm in a meeting with my boss, another man, and another man at a table in the bar area at the Four Seasons, and then it was probably about 45 minutes into this meeting, and I just heard from my left ear and from above, Dan. First thing was Dan to get my attention. So I turned my head, and I'm looking at the chandelier. That's just where it came from. Start your own business. It was that loud, David. It was like schmuck. Like, don't miss this message. This is going to change your entire life, which it did. It was like schmuck. Pay attention. But I looked at it. I'm like, what? What? Like, I couldn't believe it was like Moses was in the chandelier talking to me. God, I'm telling you, I didn't see an apparition. I didn't see a figure. I didn't see a man's face. I didn't see God's face. Now this is a crystal chandelier. Someone had said recently, it was crystals, right? I go, yeah, of course it's crystals. Well, crystals have energy, and I'm like, okay, that's right. Whoever my spirit guide is, or whatever, because I've had voices my whole life. I've had voices and that things that always came true every single time it came true. But this was the only voice that I didn't hear in my ear, my right ear. I heard it left and above from the chandelier. It's just where it came from. And I'm so grateful to that channel. That chandelier changed my life, man. It's incredible.
That is incredible. I mean, you're so tapped in.
The very first chapter in my book, My Paranormal Life, which just came out, the first chapter is called My Gargoyle. When I was 5 years old, I had two little girl friends from across the street, sisters. I was 5. One of them was 6. One of them was 8. And the three of us, we used to climb trees and fences together. And I think we played jump rope as well. That's all I can remember. Now, this is 1961. I'm 5 near Asbury Park, New Jersey, suburban New Jersey. So we used to play in the neighborhood. One day, these two girls came, got me, and we went down the block, and then a block below, there was my house, my parents' house. There was a mini mall, and in there was a drugstore, and next to the drugstore was a large billboard sign promoting the drugstore. Now, how tall is a billboard sign? 20, 30 feet? It seems to me it would have to be 20, 30 feet to be seen from the road. So me and these two little sisters, one of them says, let's climb the billboard sign. Fine. So we go behind the sign to the wooden skeleton lattice that's holding up the sign. And we're climbing straight up. Now, these two girls were climbing up ahead of me. I remember seeing them go up ahead of me. And then I'm the third one. I'm the littlest kid there. So I'm climbing up and I'm thinking, this is cool. This is fun. This is great. At some point, David, I climb up the sign. Now, I don't know. It had to be at least 10 feet, if not 15 or 20, that I'm up. I lost grip. Both of my hands, I remember both of my hands lost the grip of the wooden beam. I saw it happen. I was like, uh-oh. And then instead of falling vertically down, you would think, because if I'm climbing vertically up, you'd think I would climb straight down, fall down. What happened was I went on my back, my face facing the sky, and I fell through the air in slow motion. I'm falling in slow motion like this. And I'm thinking, oh, this isn't going to be good. The two girls, Kathy and Lizzie, I remember their names. Danny, Danny. They're like screaming, Danny, because they're watching me fall. I'm going like this, horizontally falling in slow motion. Okay. Now I have missing time. I have missing time. And I just was hypnotized 3 weeks ago by Yvonne Smith, who is a world famous hypnotist. We couldn't figure out what the missing time, how that happened. But I'm falling, missing time. I wake up 2 blocks away from the sign on a couch inside a home. No one was home. It was a furnished home. No one was there. I'm on a couch, laying prone on a couch. My eyes are closed. My eyes open, and my first thought, David, was, "Am I dead?" My first thought, honest to God, am I dead? I sit up. Hello, I'm 5. Hello, hello, is anyone home? I remember clearly. I said, hello, is anyone home? No one's home. I'm in a strange house 2 blocks away. The 2 little girls I was with were not there. You would logically, if I had fallen, these 2 little girls would have picked up my corpse or my whatever and brought it either to their mommy's house or my mommy's house, which is a block and a half away. They weren't there. So I look around, no one's there. I stand up to leave. I turn to the right, and I swear this is true. There's a 7 foot tall cryptid being in front of the open screen door. He's standing there. I knew it was a male. It was not a person. It was not a human being. I describe it as the bottom half looked like like a donkey body and two donkey legs standing upright. The upper torso was like a V, like a powerful V. Instinctively, I knew this creature had wings at one time, but instead of wings, there were bony stumps. There was on either shoulder. There was like a bone sticking out. I thought to myself, well, this is what I'm thinking now. Like it's like God took a hedge clipper and had cut off this thing's wings. Okay, bony stumps, and then it had the face of a bull. It had the face of a bull. It was like white chocolate, grayish pale color, 6, 7 feet tall, and I look at it, and I'm just standing there like I wasn't afraid. It turned his head over his right shoulder, and he went like this. Like that. He snorted at me. This thing snorted at me. I remember clear as day. And I thought to myself, oh, he doesn't like me very much. That was my thought in the moment. Oh, he doesn't like me very much.
Were you scared?
No, not at all. Today, as an adult, I think my feeling was when he snorted at me, he was saying to me, yeah, I saved your life, you little bastard, but I really didn't want to. That's the impression I get now. Okay. He turns his face. He goes through. Now, I don't know if he vanished or he walked through the screen door. I don't know. I can't recall how he left, but he left through that door. After he left, I thought, well, okay, I guess I should go home now. So I walk through the door. I look around. My parents' house was pink, the only pink house in the neighborhood. It was like a block and a half to the left. I remember seeing, oh, there's mommy's house. It's pink. I said, oh, I found it. I walked home. So I walked home. Now, did I die and this thing saved me? I think so. Did it catch me when I was falling? Maybe. Was this an extraterrestrial? And the living room I was in was a craft. I was on a craft and I had been saved somehow. Maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to. I actually tracked down the 2 little girls the other day. I tracked down their mother. Believe it or not, I'm going to call her today. I finally got the mother's phone number. She's still alive. The mother is 90. My mother and this lady are 90. I'm going to call the mother again today and beg her that I need to talk to her 2 daughters. They're still alive. One is 69, one is 71. So I have been unable to explain that story, but Yvonne Smith, a world-famous hypnotist, said, Dan, that's the best paranormal story that I have ever heard. And I've hypnotized thousands and thousands of people. She goes, that was not I don't think it was an extraterrestrial. She goes, I believe it was an interdimensional entity from another place. Okay. Now, my mother thinks it was a dream. It was a dream. Now, Mom, no, it's my first memory. It's so vivid and clear, David. I can see it now. And when she hypnotized me, I relived the whole thing. I saw it. I know it happened. I can't tell you what that was, but that was my first truly paranormal experience. And since that day till today, I think whatever that happened to me, if I crossed over and came back, I think that has allowed me to get the voices and these other experiences. I think it opened my paranormal door, so to speak.
Or your door was already open. I mean, it sounds like you were maybe just born this way, and that's your first memory with the paranormal.
Maybe.
You know,
Maybe.
Yeah. But okay, so I'm excited for you to talk to Is it Kathy or Lizzie? Which one did you?
I got their mother. I got their mother, and she remembered me. I haven't seen or spoken to her since 1962. And this woman said, Danny, of course I remember you. I go, are you serious? You remember me? I moved out of that neighborhood in 1962. They're like, oh, of course I remember you and your parents. They were lovely people. So I'm going to call her back today and beg her. I need to talk to her daughters.
So after this happened, did you remember like going to school and talking to the girls about it at all? Or did you just kind of like don't remember anything after that?
It's such a great question. Here's the logical question, because I lived in that house for another year. I must have played with those girls again from age 5 to 6. When we moved out of the house, I was 6. Okay, so we lived there another year. How did I not bring this up to anyone? I don't remember, David, ever talking about this to anyone in my life until I wrote it in my book last year. It was a memory I've had my whole entire life. I just never. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a cool memory. Then when I wrote it down and I'm talking, people are like, "Are you kidding me? Are you serious?" It's like, not that it wasn't a big deal, but it's part of my fabric. I've had that story in my brain for 63 years, and it's just like, yeah, it's just something that happened. But now that I'm more entrenched with UFOs and Hollywood Disclosure Alliance and paranormal stuff, I said I really should write that story down. So that's the first chapter in my new book. So I called it a gargoyle. Now, last night, again, my daughter said, "Dad, I think it was a watcher." She was Googling, and we now think it might have been a watch. It was a non-human entity, absolutely 100%. It was not human. Someone said it was a minotaur. I thought it was a gargoyle. Now my daughter thinks it was a watcher. Whatever it was, David, it was from another place and time, and I think it saved my life. I do. I honestly do, because I remember on the couch, my eyes closed. As soon as I opened my eyes, the first thought was, "Am I dead?" And I'm 5. Why would I think that? Also, no scratches, cuts, bruises, blood, injuries, zero. If I fell off a 10-foot sign and had zero injuries, there's a reason I was protected somehow, I think.
Did you ever go back to the house that you walked out of? Do you know what house that was?
I never have, but you just reminded me of another really great story. I roughly have in my head it was around the bend from my parents' house. I roughly know the house. I've never been in there before, or I never had been there before or since, and no one was home. Didn't I think about this? In this era, 1960s, daddies were at work and mommies were at home making cookies. Like, my mother was home making cookies that day. Why would no one have been? Why would I be inside a home? The front door wasn't locked, obviously. No one was home, and I'm there with a cryptid being, and not the two little girls. Like, it just doesn't make sense. The whole thing just doesn't. Now, let me tell you this one. You just reminded me. This is such a great story. In 2018, I took my daughter to New Jersey to visit my mom, who still lives there, and to look at my old, where I went to school, where I played with my friends, my old homes that I lived in as a child. So at one point, me, my daughter, and my mother were driving by this house, the pink house that I mentioned a minute ago, that my very first house. I hadn't been inside that house since 1962. This is 2018. We're driving by, and there's a young couple. They were probably about 28 years old, man and woman, on the front yard watering their grass. And I drive by, and I just had a feeling that I should go in the house. So I pull the car over to the side. I go, my daughter is Anjali. I go, "Anjali, do you want to go and see my first house?" She goes, "Yeah, of course." And then I said, "Mom, do you want to go in there?" "No, too many memories." My parents got divorced in the 70s, so she didn't want to go in. I said, "Okay, Mom, you stay here. I'll be right back." So me and my daughter get out of the car. This young couple's, they're watering their lawn. I said, "Hello, hello, yes, hello, hello." I said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "I lived here from 1956 to 1962. Can I go inside and see your house?" They said, "Sure, of course." Okay. So they let me in, me, and then my daughter behind me. Now I walk into the living room. I have home movies, David, from me as a young child in that living room. Right. I'm crawling. I'm playing with toys. I'm rocking in a rocking chair. I'm running around like a lunatic with my mother. Okay. I walked in, and I swear to God, I walked into the living room. Instead of seeing what was there in 2018 in real life, I saw 1962. I was in 1962 in that living room. And I got unbelievable chills, and I'm like, Oh my God, how is this? I'm in a home movie from 1962 in 2018. I'm in it. I'm looking around. Oh my God, I see my parents' furniture. I see that, right. In those days, everything was 50s turquoise. Man, my parents loved everything was 50s turquoise. I saw the old furniture. I saw the cuckoo clock on the wall that they had. I saw my parents' living room, and it lasted for maybe 30 seconds, and then sort of went away. And then I saw the real house. Okay, that's the first thing that happened. Then I walk from the living room into the little tiny dining room. As I'm walking, I get an incredible ice cold blast down my shirt, as though someone had taken a bucket of ice water and poured it down my shirt, freezing cold down my spine. And I started to shake, like tremble and shake really hard. And I looked up at the sky and I said, "Dad, is that you?" And then I go, "Dad, I miss you so much." I fell to my knees, sobbing,
Oh,
crying as hard as I've ever cried. My daughter's looking at me. This young couple is looking at me. The guy of the couple, his mother, happened to be there. She came in. I'm sobbing. I go, "Dad, is that you? I miss you. I love you, Dad. I love you." I'm sobbing. All these people watching me now, they're crying because I'm sobbing. They have no idea what's happening. I'm sobbing. I stand up. They say to me, "Are you okay?" I go, "My father just shot down my back of my spine. My father's here." The guy said to me, "Dan, my grandfather died in this house 5 days ago. Maybe it was maybe it was my grandfather. My grandfather just died. Maybe it was." And I'm like, "Wow, maybe it was your grandfather." It turns out their grandfather, my parents in 1962, sold that house to this guy's grandfather, which means I probably met this grandfather in 1962 when my parents sold that house, right? He had just died. So the question is, I know it was a visit from the other side. I know it was. It's obvious. It's either my father or this guy's grandfather. Now I'm thinking pretty heavily. It's probably the guy's grandfather, right? But to me, my dad had died the year before. To me, it was my dad. It's called spiritual chills. I looked it up. It's called spiritual chills. It happens to people quite often when they return to their childhood homes, I've read. They get the spiritual chills. Well, David, I got it. It knocked me to my knees, sobbing, crying as hard as I could cry because it was so powerful. And then I toured the rest of the house and I hugged everyone and I drove home. But whatever that experience was, it was profound and amazing, and I wish I could explain it. You know,
it's strange because you were walking me through that, and it was as if I was walking through my childhood home while you're walking through your childhood home, and I was feeling what you were feeling, and
right.
I felt that. I felt that. That's crazy. Thank
That's
you for
great.
sharing that. Thank you for
Sure, sure.
sharing.
Well,
And
I think that's the only time I've done that in an interview. But because you said about the house, I just remembered. Last story. In 2008, I spent a 3-day weekend at the ECETI Ranch in Washington State. It's a world famous UFO hotspot. I'm a member of MUFON, and the owner, James Gilliland, gave a talk in early '08. And he said, "We see UFOs all the time." And he showed movies of UFOs. These are not like you have to squint and turn your head and, "Is that a U?" These are like crystal clear crafts flying around this guy's backyard. Okay. So I had a girlfriend at the time named Barbara, and I said, "Barbara, please come with me." So we spent a 3-day weekend at the ECETI Ranch in July 2008. There were maybe 200 people there that weekend. And he has like 150 acres of nothing, Mount Adams in the background, and his home, this guy James. Mount Adams is one mountain down the range from Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is where Kenneth Arnold saw 9 UFOs in 1947. Okay, so during the days, it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. During the days, James had a white tent on his property, and he had guest speakers like Nick Pope and David Childress and William Henry talking about aliens and crop circles and Nazca lines and the pyramids and all that cool stuff during the days. And then at night, people made a bonfire and they're playing guitars and tambourines and dancing around the fire at night, and we're sky watching. So Friday day, lecture seminars, Friday night, bonfire, looking up in the sky, hours and hours, nothing happened whatsoever, nothing. Saturday, lecture seminars, bonfire at night, looking up at the sky Saturday, hours and hours, absolutely nothing. And your neck hurts after 5 hours of looking up like that. The last day of this weekend was Sunday. Lectures, film, seminars, bonfire, dancing, singing, me and my girlfriend and 200 people were looking up for maybe an hour and a half. Nothing's happening. And we all had to leave at the end of that night. There's 200 cars on the property. And this is funny, David. I pull my car keys out of my pocket in my hand. I go, Barbara, if we leave right now, we can beat all these other cars. We can beat the traffic and get back to the airport, right? We can beat the rush. David, the second I said that, a huge black craft from behind us came from behind us, 200 feet maybe at max above us. Huge, blacks out the sky, stops and hovers over us. I looked up and I said to my girlfriend, "What the hell is that thing?" That's what I said. Underneath this thing in the middle was a huge glass crystal bulb, I'm going to call it. It lit up bright emerald green light, beautiful emerald in the bulb. And I'm like, okay. Then this beautiful green light then beamed down from this craft. It beamed down and bathed. It bathed 200 people. It bathed us in light like this. It was like light, 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 light. It was like Morse code in green light. Like in the X Files when they're looking up and they're all in white. We were in green. It was like Wizard of Oz, emerald green, gorgeous. I'm looking up, I'm crying, my heart's racing, and I'm like, wow, that's not a Chinese weather balloon. Those are them. I knew it. I knew those were extraterrestrials. I knew it. Then the light turned off, slowly went away, and then it vanished really quickly. We're hugging, we're kissing, we're crying. I got the following, and I know we have to end. In my heart, David, I got the following. Hello, we're here. We love you. Sorry we're late. We know you've been waiting for us. We got delayed. Everything's cool. Don't be afraid. We were in the neighborhood. Love one another. Be kind to planet Earth. We'll see you again sometime. We have to go now. That, and it was not in my brain. I got it in my heart, and I still feel it to this day. And then the craft left. In my book, after they came, when the aliens come, they say to the world what I just told you. We're here. We love you. Don't be afraid. Everything's cool. We have an affinity for mankind. So the message I got from that green light in my heart went into my book after they came. And that's my message is hopefully when the aliens do come and reveal themselves, hopefully they'll be kind to us.
I love that. And what's really great about that, Dan, is green is the color of the heart chakra. So,
oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. So it makes sense that it opened up your heart. That is so cool.
Okay. I didn't know that. I'll have to tell my daughter that. Yeah, it was emerald, beautiful emerald green.
Wow, that's beautiful.
You think about like how many X Files, right? It's always white. It's always the bright white light, right? Mine was green. Now I've told people, I've told a lot of experiencers. They said, Dan, I've had experiences, but I never saw green. God, I'd love to see green. So I don't know. I think, David, that's part of whatever my paranormal thing is. That was a moment that they contacted me like personally. That was a one-on-one kind of thing that I got.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. Okay, I'm good now. We're good.
Dan, if people want to reach you, do you have a website or should they go to the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance website? Are you open to people contacting you?
Oh, sure. There's two ways to go. And thank you for having me. DanHararyAuthor.com. Dan, Harary, author.com. All my books are there. My bio, my fun photos of me with Spielberg and Jerry Seinfeld and Mel Brooks and Alice Cooper and Hugh Hefner, and all the fun photos are there. And if you're interested in extraterrestrial research and UFOs, it's HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org, .org, O-R-G. If you would like to join, it tells you how. And we're always looking for people with good stories. And we're certainly looking for more Hollywood producers and screenwriters, of course. So, David, if you know anybody, send them my way. And yeah, that's it, man. Thanks. This was super fun. Thank you.
It's been great. Thanks again. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to me, and I will see you in the next video.